Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. A few days ago I uploaded a video showing how I made this vase out of 8 separate resin pieces, and I had an overwhelming response from people asking how I made the mould for one of the pieces and how I got the measurements to make the mould in the first place. So I've created this video today to show people exactly how I made the mould and how I got the shape for the mould in the first place. If you haven't already seen the vase video and you're wondering what on earth I'm talking about, I will leave the link to that video in the description. Here's the glass vase, which was my inspiration. I've had it for years and I love the shape of it. And so that's the vase I decided to choose to take my measurements from. The method which I'm using today isn't necessarily the best method, but it's the method that I used and I think is most accessible to everybody without the need of lots of fancy tools. So it works, but it's probably not the easiest way. I just wanted to say that before I begin. So the first job is to section off my vase into 8 pieces. And I'm using some tape, which happens to be copper tape, but only because that's what I had. I wanted some narrow tape, and this copper tape is narrow, so I used that. But you can use any tape you like, as long as it's narrow, really. It does kind of need to be as thin as you can get it. So I'm just going to section it into 8 pieces with the tape. You really don't need to worry about getting this exact. It really doesn't matter, as long as there's kind of a equal space between each piece of tape. That's all that matters. You don't need to get it absolutely spot on. Next, I got my tape measure and held it up right to the top of the vase and marked all the way down each piece of tape at 2 centimetre intervals. Once that was done, I took an A3 piece of mount board, or mat board some people call it. It's the kind of card that you get for picture framing, to create the mount for your picture inside the frame. That's what it is, and I'm using that for my master to make the mould from. Now I'm marking out a line on the board, and that's going to be the centre line of my template, and all the measurements that I add onto there will start from that centre line. But first of all, I'm just using my protractor to measure out that 45-degree angle at the bottom of the template. The vase that I create needs 8 pieces, and so obviously, the circle at the bottom of the vase needs to be split into 8 equal angles, which is obviously, again, I'm telling you things you probably already know, 45 degrees. And that's what I'm doing here, just marking out the 45-degree angle for the bottom of the vase. Now I need to know the overall height of my template, so I'm just measuring from the top of the vase right to the centre of the bottom of the vase. And now I'm using that measurement to mark out the height of my template. Now I know where the top of my template is, I can measure my 2 centimetre intervals all the way down. Right, now the reason for all those marks on the tape will become apparent. I've taken a piece of string. It's quite a primitive way of doing this, but I find it works really well. A piece of string and just wrapping it round the vase at all the same points at that level so that it touches all those points so I know it's level, and then once I've got the string measured with my finger, I'm just holding it where it came to an end, I'm just measuring it against a ruler. And then that gives me the circumference of the vase at that point. Then all you need to do is divide that circumference by 16, and that will give you the measurement for half of your one piece of vase, if that makes sense. So you'll be pleased to hear that that's the only maths that you need to do. You'll probably need a calculator unless you're a super maths brain. I'm not, I use a calculator. And yeah, take all your measurements with your piece of string at all those points that you've marked on your vase and divide each one by 16. So then I'm just transferring that measurement, which has been, the one that I got on the calculator after dividing it by 16, transferring that measurement onto my template, starting from that centre line. So there we have it with all the points marked out, and now it's just a case of joining them up. You could do it freehand, but I had one of those bendy rulers which works really well for doing a nice smooth curved line, so I used that. Right then, so that's half of the template drawn out. Don't try to do the same thing on the other side because the chances are it won't be exactly the same on both sides. So what I'm doing here is cutting out that half template that I've just made, and I'm going to use that to draw around. So I'm just drawing out another centre line on the other part of the cardboard. I'm going to draw around that half template which I just made, and then I'm going to flip it over and do exactly the same thing on the other side. That way you've got a completely symmetrical template. Right, because I'm going to be making a mould from this, I need it to be the same thickness that I want my panel of resin for my vase to be. And really this card is too thin to just use one piece. So I've cut it out, I'm putting some glue on the back, and I'm just sticking it down to the remaining piece of card that I had. And then I'm going to cut it all out. I've actually made a digital version of this template for my patrons over on Patreon so that they can download it and print it out and then just make their own template exactly the same as mine. I've also attached the tree image which I used in my other video to make the tree panels on the vase. So my image for that is also attached to this video on Patreon. Whenever I make a new template for a project like this one, or for my pyramid boxes, or my coaster boxes, my jewellery boxes, I do like to give the template to the patrons which I have on the full membership tier, just to say a big thank you for all the support that they give me. Right, we're on to making the mould now. Now, because I've made my mould master out of cardboard, it's not really ideal for pouring silicone onto. Firstly, because you will get a dull surface to your mould, and secondly, the silicone won't come off the master quite as easily as it will doing it this way. So what I'm doing is just putting some sticky backed plastic just on one side, the side that is going to be touched by the silicone, and trimming around the edge. That way you're making it nice and shiny, and your mould will be shiny too. The same idea applies to the edges, so I'm using some of that copper tape which I used earlier on, and like I said before, it doesn't need to be copper tape, it just happens to be what I had. You need any kind of non-porous tape. Sticky tape would do, just normal sticky tape. But I like this because of the narrowness. So I'm going to stick that all around the edges, and because it's a little bit thicker than my mould master, I'm going to make sure that the overlapping tape is around the non-shiny side, and I will just fold it over. But I don't want it folding over on the shiny side. I want to keep that side nice and smooth because that's the bit that is going to be moulded. Right, now you're going to need a big flat surface, which is slightly bigger than your mould master. And I've chosen a piece of glass. It needs to be something smooth, perfectly smooth, and just a bit bigger than your master, and you'll be sorted. It doesn't have to be glass, it's just that's what I found that was the right size. Well, actually, I would have liked it to have been a bit bigger. I had to use this diagonally, but anyway, it works for me. So I've just got some cheap Fablon. It's kind of that stuff that you can cover things with, just a really cheap one from the pound shop. And I'm going to be using that to stick my mould master onto, and that's then going to be just quickly attached to the glass. So once it's on the sticky backed plastic, make sure you really give it a really good rub on the back of your mould master, and that will stop any silicone from seeping underneath, because you really don't want that. If you want a really clean edge to your mould, this is the secret to getting a clean edge. Really rub that sticky backed plastic really well down onto your mould master, and you will be sorted. It works really well. And here I'm just using some sticky tape to keep it in place. One thing I did forget to say was that it needs to be shiny side up. So the bit you can see now is the shiny bit, the bit that I put the clear sticky backed plastic on earlier. Here I'm just cutting some plexiglass to make the barriers for my mould. You do not need to use this. I just happen to have it and it does work really well. But you don't need to go out and buy it. What you could use is some cardboard, probably not the same one you've made your mould master out of, that'd be a bit too stiff. Some thinner cardboard, covered in sellotape, sticky tape, or aluminium tape would work well. Anything that's non-porous would work. So yeah, don't go spending money getting the same thing that I've used. You don't need to. And now I'm just gluing it all into place with my glue gun and making sure I've got no leaky spots. I don't want any of that silicone leaking out, so I'm putting plenty of glue on. Right, to make my mould, I'm using pure mould from Resin Pro. It's a 2-part, like all mould making things are, 2 parts, but it's 1-to-1. And it's my favourite. I've tried all kinds of different mould making solutions, but this one is my favourite. But you don't need this one, you can use any. They all work good, but yeah, I do like this one. And I'll put a link to this in my description, because I've got a discount code for 15% off anything from Resin Pro, and so you can use it to get 15% off your pure mould or anything else. I've just measured out 75 grams of part A, and I'm going to now clear the scales and do 75 grams of part B and give it a really good mix together. And you do need to mix it for ages because they're both the same colour and you cannot tell whether it's mixed correctly or not. So you just need to mix for as long as you can. If your arm's not aching, you probably haven't mixed it for long enough. I mix for about 5 minutes to make sure it's completely mixed together, because you see, one part is the catalyst and that's what makes it into the rubber mould, and so it needs to be evenly distributed, just like when you're doing resin. Right, once it's mixed, it's just a case of pouring it on. When I pour the silicone on, I try not to move it around too much, kind of just along the middle and let it find its own way down the sides. And that way you're less likely to get air bubbles trapped, well, air pockets trapped, should I say. So yeah, just go down the middle and let it find its own way, and it does really well. And once you've finished pouring your silicone in, just give the surface a lot of taps. Just keep tapping because the vibrations will help any trapped air to escape. Once you've finished with it, make sure you put it somewhere level. Get your spirit level out and make sure wherever you're going to leave it, it's completely level. And then the next day it should be ready. Right, it's the next day and my mould is ready. Now, if you're going to be doing your vase the same way as me and you're making 8 moulds, the best way to do this next bit is to just take off the end like I've just done. Because if you can manage to keep the rest of it intact, you won't need to do it all over again. Just peel the mould out, and then once it's out, you can put maybe not the same piece. If you've broken the piece, taking it out, the piece of barrier, you might need to cut a new one. But put a piece back in and glue it down, and it's ready to be filled again for the next mould. And it's really quick and easy that way. So yeah, you don't have to take it all to bits to get the mould out. So there we have it, a lovely shiny mould, all ready and waiting for resin to be poured in it. It was quite easy really, wasn't it? I hope that's answered some of your questions if you were one of the people that requested this video, and I really hope you can go on and make your own resin vase. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again next time. Bye for now.